Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Normally, Matt, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm the pretty one of this duo. I mean, we all know that. I bring the looks.
You're the Hannity. I'm the Combs.
That's right.
This relationship.
That's right. But I'm a bit more bedraggled than usual because the entire household got hit with some kind of virus this week, except for me. I'm standing tall. But both kids and my partner all went down this week. So having to manage the workload and the household has been a bit much. So if I'm not on my A game, both fashion wise and punditry wise, that is why.
I think you look fabulous, Bill, but you do every week. So
very kind, very kind. But it is a busy week. I think you thought last week was a little slow, but I think we're a little busier this week.
By modern standards, it was slow. But by historical standards, it was insane. So,
but you wrote a while ago that any Republican that didn't vote to stop Trump's national emergency was dead to you. And the House vote happened, and only 13 House Republicans stood with Matt Lewis against Donald Trump. We're taping Thursday morning. We don't know what the vote's going to be yet. But it looks like, even if the numbers aren't that big, that enough Republicans will side with Democrats to pass the resolution, which that you got to be feeling pretty good. The principal conservatives are not haven't wiped off the face of the earth.
So right now there are 5. As we tape this, there are 5 who've come out. 3 of them would be more considered moderates, I think. And then you've got Rand Paul, libertarian, and Mike Lee, sort of a principled constitutional conservative. So yeah, it's a good sign. It's something.
And once usually you get over the threshold, that tends to be when other folks jump on the bandwagon because they won't be seen as the deciding vote. They won't take all that heat.
That's true, but I still think that it's a courageous vote because I've started seeing people and, basically people on the other side saying the same thing I have said, right? I've said that if you vote with Trump on his emergency declaration, and I use the term emergency very loosely, you're dead to me. Well, I'm seeing people like at Fox News, like the Lou Dobbses of the world, say the other thing. Like, if you vote against this Republican president, you need to be gone. You shouldn't be reelected. And I think there's a real fear amongst Republicans, not actually that they're afraid of Trump specifically, but it's that the base of the Republican Party expects Republican senators to vote with the president. And for all this nonsense of, all this talk about what's constitutional and the dangerous precedent, like that's very abstract compared to the pretty simplistic notion that you should just support your president if you're a Republican.
So do you have a good sense of to what extent is this beltway elitists like yourself who are all hung up on constitutional principles, whereas the larger mass of rank-and-file Republicans are expecting people to salute? Or is this manifesting a deeper divide in the Republican base between traditional conservatism and fealty to Trump?
No, I think that it's very much, if you are a rank-and-file Republican voter, you expect your senator to vote with the Republican president. And the people who are not in that camp are either people who are thinking about ideas and precedents and principles, or people who just are not, in favor of a wall to begin with. But I don't think that there's much of a division amongst rank and file Republicans. I think they're pretty much not unanimous, but very much in the camp of Donald Trump on this. I think, look, people want, I think we might have talked about this before. I forget it on air or off, Bill, but my kids basically want a king. I mean, it's very simple for them to understand. Like, shouldn't the president just be able to do what he wants to do? That's a very simple concept. And I think a lot of people, they don't want to hear about co-equal branches and balance of powers and the Federalist Papers or whatever. Like, that's dorm room conversation talk for them. It's like, we elected this guy to get the job done. Other people are trying to stop him. He should be able to do what we sent him to Washington to do.
Forgive me for historical digression, but so in my new presidential book club, which I'm doing at the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Library and Museum, as the vice chair of the museum committee, we're reading Abigail and John, Portrait of a Marriage, and so we're in my reading, I'm just getting to the Second Continental Congress, where, if memory serves, they actually get to the Declaration of Independence. And so in the run-up to that, that's when Thomas Paine's Common Sense becomes this big hit. And that is sort of the raw populism of the day. And Abigail loves it, like a lot of Americans do, and John, likes it, but he's also disturbed by the solutions that Paine is proposing, because his solution is unicameral government, which is essentially akin to a more direct democracy, which Adams thinks would be a disaster. And so he then writes a response where he sketches out the checks and balances concept. And so when I read that sort of felt to me like his complaining about it made it so analogous to like Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal,
right?
Broad brush, ambitious principles, not really thinking through the practical realities, and Adams pushing against the populist tide.
Yeah, and don't forget, Paine ends up, I think, in the Bastille during the French Revolution.
Right.
So there are consequences. Since you plugged something, I'll plug something. Erin and my wife and I went to see a play called JQA about John Quincy Adams.
Interesting.
Which is quite nice. I don't know if it's going around the country or what, but we went to see it in D.C. at the Wharf, and there were just 4 actors that did the entire play.
So what
good.
Do they cover his whole life or a certain time period?
Yeah, it's an hour and a half long, and there's probably 6 different little vignettes. And each actor, like I said, I think there are 4 that just 4, and they each play at different moments. They each play John Quincy Adams, so they take turns playing different characters. And so the first scene is John Adams talking to his son, John Quincy Adams. My favorite scenes were, there was one where it's President John Quincy Adams in the Oval Office with I think it's Henry Clay, and Henry Clay is getting drunk, and that was really good. And then there's a scene with Andrew Jackson and Adams in the White House too. But it's worth seeing if it comes to your town.
Do you have more to say on the national emergency stuff, or should we seg?
I have more to say.
Okay, so so getting back to national emergency. What are you looking for in this vote?
I'm looking to see. I'm very curious about Ted Cruz, to be honest with you. I mean, this is a guy, and Bill Kristol has done a good job of demonstrating this in videos that he pushes around Twitter. But Cruz really made the argument against Barack Obama's executive overreach in 2014. So I think if Cruz votes with Trump on this one, that it's just, the height of hypocrisy. I'm very curious about that. But I'm also curious about what happens. Trump's going to veto this. It'll be his first veto. And then I think the vote to overturn the veto is arguably more important. So will there be people who try to have their cake and eat it too, which I think is a mistake, right? You end up making enemies of both sides instead of just one side. But I bet you that there are some people who end up switching their votes and siding with the president.
Yeah, that seems like a bad move. I mean,
it is. Yeah,
you've already shown to the Trump base, look, I'm not really with you. I wanted to stop him. That was what I wanted in my heart of hearts. And whatever gain you would get from the principal conservatives is lost by saying, oh, well, I made Trump mad. I don't want to make Trump mad, so I stood down. Pick your side.
Yeah, no, I think it's a bad move, but I bet you somebody or more than one person falls for it. And again, I need to stress, I think that what really complicates this is that the average rank and file voter thinks just logically that if you're a Republican, you should be with Trump on this, and that you should toe the line. And then there's going to be people more prominent than me at places like Fox News, and there'll be talk radio hosts who will say that this is a red line vote. You're dead to me if you don't vote for Trump. So that's going to be a lot of pressure on people, especially if it gets to trying to override a veto.
Could this give any oxygen to a Republican primary challenge?
I don't think so. The thing you're not allowed to say, like on TV, is no, actually, this isn't a big deal. But I just don't see the Republican challenge happening. Now, I do think you never know what's going to happen. I mean, look at this guy. How do I pronounce the mayor from Fort Bend, Indiana? How do I say that?
Buttigieg, if I believe.
Buttigieg?
Buttigieg.
Buttigieg.
Okay. So everyone can correct me if I get it wrong. That's my understanding.
I'm still trying to say Beto. It seems it's a different scenario, right? But there's an opportunity for someone to kind of make a name for himself or herself by getting in, but it just doesn't seem likely, right? And we're still hearing from Larry Hogan, the governor of Maryland, but doesn't seem like there's much progress on that front.
Well, Build Well is still exploring, although the exploratory committee is not exactly off to a roaring start. This hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but John Kasich, who's now a CNN contributor, but still in theory is thinking about it. So he had an op-ed this week where he moved towards the left on climate in a pretty significant way. He was not the hardest core anti-climate change acceptance person in 2016, but he was still questioning the science. He was still saying we're not going to get rid of coal. He was trying to carve a bit of a moderate space, but still was getting tugged to the right. And this op-ed, he was taking Green New Deal as a foil, but saying we need free market solutions to climate. He said we need to pursue a carbon tax or a cap and trade system. He said we should spend a lot of money on investing in renewables. And he said we should stay in the Paris Agreement. These are all things that I think are significantly to the left of where he was in 2016. Now, you can interpret that as, well, I guess it means he's definitely not running in a Republican primary.
He may run. I mean, look, I respect someone who wants to enter into the arena and start engage in debates and try to change, perception of issues, and more power to him for that. But you're not gonna win the Republican nomination by whining your way to the nomination. You're not gonna lecture the base your way to the nomination, and you're not gonna virtue signal your way to the nomination. And so I think he's a joke as a political candidate, and I always have. I went on TV and said so, in January of 2016. Doesn't mean that he's not he's got a right to an opinion, and he could be, a voice to possibly start nudging conservative intellectuals one direction or the other, but not I don't see it happening as a primary challenge.
So for you, it's Hogan or nothing? Are you not? Are you hearing me, Matt?
I'm back now.
Okay. So for you,
I think anytime I say something that the suits at blogging heads deem off script, they're messing with my Skype.
So for you, is it Hogan or nothing?
Well, I think in 2020 that's probably the case. I don't think there's like Bill Kristol praying in vain for a savior to rise from these streets or waste his summer or whatever the Bruce Springsteen line is. I just don't see it. I mean, to me, the key is I think that we've talked about this before, but it was better to be strong and wrong than right and weak. Mm-hmm. I think there is an opening out there somewhere for a charismatic figure to actually fix things and to actually go against the perverse incentives on the left and the right. I think there's an opportunity for that person to emerge, but it has to be someone who has star power. I really believe that you have to have the moment and the person, the stars aligning, and I just certainly do not see it happening right now in 2020 in the Republican Party.
So the other big news today is the long-awaited Beto announcement. Folks, regular DMZ listeners know that Matt Lewis wants to be Beto's best friend. And I, Bill Scher, am dubious about his presidential prospects.
No, I jumped off the Beto train. Don't you remember that?
I mean, if you want to take credit for being a Beto skeptic when I was there first, we go right ahead. But we know deep down.
I admit to being an early Beto booster, but then I shifted.
So in seeing the Vanity Fair profile that came out, a few hours before the confirmation that he's running, did any of that change your mind? Is this the package? Did he have? Is he going to get that media love that a presidential candidate needs, or is this another example of how insufferable this whole project has become?
Well, I mean, first of all, like as a conservative, it's the kind of thing that conservatives almost never get, is that kind of glamorous treatment from Vanity Fair. So that's one issue. But no, look, I think it's really, you could say, this sounds cliched and it sounds like you could say this about any candidate, but I think it's truer of Beto than almost anybody, is I really think it's like sink or swim. Like, I think there's a chance that he rises to the occasion, sort of like Obama did, and takes off, and he's the real deal. And then I think there's a chance that this guy just flounders, and it's like, Fred Thompson or Wesley Clark. I think there's a lot of range here. This could go really good or really bad. I don't know that there's like much of a middle ground. It seems like it's.
I mean, I would agree with that, but I don't definitively predict anything because people can grow and get better, and he obviously has certain assets that he brings. He has a small donor base. He obviously gets a lot of media attention. He's getting more media attention than, say, a Jane Inslee gets, on his first day. But I haven't seen anything from the point of his Senate defeat to now, which makes me question my initial skepticism. I don't think he has spent that time well.
There doesn't seem to be a lot of substance. There's a lot of, he's cool, he looks good, he doesn't seem threatening, he seems like a nice guy. That's not substance, though. I
think it's worse than that. I mean, and this is not just my knee-jerk pundit, lazy hot take bias. I mean, his numbers are down from where they were upon losing the Senate race. He was getting some double-digit numbers in the post-election Betomania, and now he's more around 5% in a lot of polls. And I think that's because he didn't spend November to March sharpening his views and giving people a sense of what he would be like as president, he spent the time on these sort of meandering road trips and being all moody and navel gazing. I mean, the vibe out of the Senate race was that he was leading a movement, and it shifted very abruptly from being about this large mass of people coming together to break America's polarization to something that's very individual about him, and his individual story is not that interesting. It's one of the like, this really great origin story we want to learn about. You went to college and you had kind of a meandering 20s, and you married somebody rich, and now you live high on the hog in Texas. That's not very exciting.
No, I completely agree with you. My only question is, why did that happen? Like, why did it seem like he was leading a movement? And then why did he do anything differently, or did just the context of our understanding?
No, this is him. He made a deliberate choice to say, I'm going to spend this time writing journal entries and road tripping. I mean, that literally makes it about him as an individual, and that's.
But wasn't it? But when he was running, isn't that? I'm not trying to be difficult here. I agree with you that the perception of him has shifted, and it seems kind of solipsistic, and that he's like full of kind of an angsty teenager, and like all that stuff. I completely agree with. I just don't know. Like, in a way, the campaign continued. The only difference is, by definition, it became more about him because he's no longer running against Ted Cruz.
Well, I mean, where there's a through line is this sort of sense that he's a Gen Xer, wannabe millennial, live streaming his life, which he did to good effect.
Yeah, that's my point. He rode skateboards while he was running for Senate, and people ate it up. If he did that today, people would see it as like narcissistic and lame.
Well, I think the difference is that during the campaign, that stuff was kind of the icing on the cake of the movement. I mean, it was the DVD extras. It was the behind the scenes of this big movement. There was still lots of footage about big crowds and talking straight about taking a knee and embodying the ideal of what liberals see as the American experience, the American experiment. And all that element of it is gone in the past 5 months.
Right.
With the one exception of the rally he had in El Paso, which arguably is the one really good moment he had in this interim period.
I guess my point would be, my argument is, it's not that Beto changed. It's that I'm using that sort of inclusive we ascribe to him that he was the leader of a movement, and he became a symbol for us of what we needed in a leader, and once the campaign ended, the context for that ended, the crowds by definition ended, and we were left with the same guy, but now our perception of him has changed. Now that he's back in a political campaign, that would possibly be good news for him. Now he has an excuse to be seen in the campaign context again.
And I agree, he could, get back in a groove now. I mean, that's completely possible. But I don't.
Right, because I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm really thinking this through. I mean, like, if you want attention and you need attention, running for office is a built-in excuse to scratch that itch, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you don't need to live stream your dental teeth cleaning because tomorrow at 2 p.m. you're giving a big speech to the Kiwanis Club. So he has an excuse now to scratch that itch.
Right, and so I agree that, running a more traditional campaign, relatively speaking, doing the rallies, having the crowds, this might feel different fairly soon. But what I think is unnerving for his prospects is I the notion that he was the leader of a movement, I think, is hype that he has bought himself. And the article that I wrote back in November, How the Beta Bubble Could Burst, my whole argument there was his relative success in Texas is not unique to him and his personality and his campaign strategies and his small donor base. He was the beneficiary of a broader blue trend in Texas that is analogous to the trend happening nationally in urban and suburban areas that are rejecting Trump.
No, I think you're selling him short. I think there is something special about him, but the problem is everything special about him is superficial. None of it's based on substance. I don't know of any big idea that he has. Do you?
Well, he doesn't have a singular big idea. I mean, he has some ability to communicate the progressive ideal of America. Multiculturalism, embracing immigrants, embracing dissent in the name of racial justice. Those are all elements that progressives get excited about. But he doesn't have a policy prescription that's unique to him to sell at this point. Maybe he's going to develop it now. But I mean, I think your take and my take, are only sort of a few degrees apart. I think we agree on the superficiality of it. And I think if he had a more clinical assessment of how his campaign did, I don't think he would have proceeded on the road trip strategy.
Yeah. Do you know
he would try to shorten up the weaknesses he had over this period of time?
Reagan had Mike Deaver and Lynn Nofziger and ultimately James Baker. Bush had Karl Rove. Obama had David Axelrod. Beto has the Bernie Bros.
He doesn't have the Bernie Bros. The Bernie Bros can't stand him.
He's got the Pod Save America.
Yes. Right. I think that is probably the closest thing he has to a brain trust.
That's actually part of my question. Is there anybody strategizing here? Is there an old bearded man somewhere that is telling Beto, I've seen a million races like this, and this is what you should do?
I mean, I can't know what kind of conversations he's having. We get leaks here and there. We have some indication that they're aware of what backlash is out there. I can only assume that people who have made critiques like mine, which are, look at the actual numbers, look at your performance numbers in Texas. They're not any different, really, than, say, Kirsten Sinema's in Arizona, who ran a very different campaign than yours and got a lot less buzz around it. So maybe you should question what it is that you actually bring to the table here. And if you're going to run, maybe it's not just doing the same old, same old. My assumption is nobody in his inner circle is communicating that message to him. Or if it's getting in there, they are debunking and saying, don't listen to that stuff. You be you. You are special.
Yeah, because he doesn't want to listen to pollsters and consultants, right? Because that's not authentic.
Right. So, and I only make that conclusion because of the way he's behaved. He's behaved in a way that does not suggest he's making adjustments from a defeat to be able to perform on an even bigger stage in a successful way.
So, can you give me putting you on the spot here, but I was like, the Bernie Bros, and you're like, no, the Bernie Bros hate him, and I'm like, oh yeah, the Pod Save America guys. Is there sort of like a taxonomy or something of the kinds of people that right now, who are the kinds of prominent people, the socialists, the Democratic socialists, I guess, are with Bernie. What kinds of and who's that that Chapo trap house or whatever?
Yeah.
They did in their book the different types of liberals, right?
Right.
So where are the different types of liberals at on each candidate right now?
Well, if you asked a Chapo trap house socialist, they would say Beto was just a Democratic establishment, Obama 2.0. in a negative way, in the negative sense.
Yeah.
And sort of having the Pots of America guys being behind him. And something I tweeted about back in December is getting.
So the Pod Save America guys are basically Obama bros, and they're with Beto.
Well,
for those of us following along at home here,
the Pots of America is done by a media company called Crooked Media. Crooked Media has a stake in the HBO documentary that just was released of Beto. So it's not even just that there's an affinity; there's actually a financial tie. And I don't say that. And I tweeted about this in December. Another reporter made mention of it just yesterday because the documentary just had its first screening. I'm not suggesting that they're in it for the grift.
It's very possible that they made the documentary about him because they really like him and believe in him, and they really believe in him, so they made the documentary about him. But they're going to make money if he does well.
I mean, there is definitely a closeness there, where you have a people who are part of Obama world. I mean, they're not the entirety of Obama world. Obama world's pretty big, but saying we think this guy is the next Obama, and we're going to invest a lot of our, blood, sweat, and money into making that case. And so, and I think there are some folks who are Obama fans that do see that in Beto. And so I think from the social perspective, that's what he is. Now, I don't think that is at all.
Who's the Kirsten Gillibrand voter? Who's that person?
That person is Kirsten Gillibrand. There is no Kirsten Gillibrand voter.
Is there a type? Is there like...
She literally polls 0%. She literally cannot get endorsement from her own home state. Like that is, I can't even create a taxonomy for a Kirsten Gillibrand voter.
Okay. Who else is running?
Look, if I'm going to
I think we know. I think the Amy Klobuchar voter, that person exists, right? That's the moderate.
Let me go this from a different starting point. I think you got to start with Bernie and Biden.
Okay,
they're the top tier. I think all indications are Biden's going to run. They're going to announce in April, and Bernie is your Democratic Socialist voter. I think he has held on to that base. Other folks who have tried to move left have not really. Look, he's in the mid-20s.
So will AOC be like Team Bernie?
I mean, she hasn't made the endorsement yet, and I can't predict if she will. But I think there is an enormous amount of overlap there.
Yeah.
And so even though Bernie got around 40% in the primaries, and now he's at the mid-20s, so you can say, well, he's not where he was.
So if John Favreau is Beto, AOC, for now, we think AOC is Bernie.
I mean, they campaigned together on the trail. They certainly they're one of the few literally avowed Democratic socialists in the Democratic Party. So I would say, yeah.
So Bernie really hurts Elizabeth Warren.
I think he has. I think Warren has tried to present herself as a market-oriented populist. So she wants to break up big tech. She wants to break up Apple. She wants a wealth tax. So it's not like she's talking about milquetoast stuff. But she is. No one's using this terminology, but she's more of a Brandeis progressive. Big is bad. So it's not to replace big business with big government per se. It's to break up the big business so we can have a robust market, a more competitive market with more smaller companies. I think that's Bernie light, right? So as long as Bernie's there, you can't out Bernie. Well, I think that is her problem. Her hope was that she would be a more electable version of Bernie because she wasn't going full socialist. She was still saying she likes markets, and that would have more appeal in, say, working class heartland America. I think the reality so far is if you first and foremost want Medicare for all, single payer, free college, free childcare, you want the whole European social democracy smorgasbord. Bernie's the one guy who you can say, I know I know that's what he wants. He's not just going to mouth it. If he's elected, he's going to fight for it. He's not talking about other alternatives. He's not saying, I would like to get there, but maybe there's other things to do in the interim. He wants the whole shebang. And there's no one else that's going to do that. And so that's why I think Warren right now is left with a very small piece of the pie. And someone like, so to go back to, so Bernie's got that. Bernie's got the left flank largely nailed down. Biden comes out with a robust sense of nostalgia. We got to get back to where we were as a unified country. We can't be dismissive of bipartisanship. We have to get things done, and we as a people have that commonality of the American spirit still exists. If you saw his speech to the firefighters on Tuesday, those are the themes that he was driving really hard with a progressive element in that he was really hugging unions and backbone of work in America. Built the middle class. Like he's
just sort of like the silent majority of the left. Is his
of the center left of the Democratic Party, more broadly defined, and just based on what polling we exist, there is appeal for that with the older vote in the Democratic Party, which is not an insignificant vote. The older vote's what gave Hillary the nomination over Bernie. So those are the two biggest pieces right now. And now,
all right, I think there's Kamala is the one. Well, who's the avatar of the Kamala vote?
Well, so once you get past Bernie and Biden, you have I think a pretty large group of Democrats who say, "Oh God, two old white guys, give me a break." That is, this party is the party of civil rights. It's the party of multiculturalism. It's the party that's going to stand up to racism and bigotry. We cannot have an old white guy be the standard bearer. But that voice of the party has not consolidated around one candidate yet. And if Beto gets a bump, if there is a piece of people who say, I want someone younger and fresher who can represent the multicultural Democratic Party, and I think that's Beto, even though he's a white guy, because he talks about those issues in a very forceful way, that makes it even harder to consolidate a vote around a non-white male person. Kamala's got the biggest edge there so far. She's the one you could say is remotely in the top tier. She's kind of hanging around at 10%, whereas Cory Booker is more at 5%, and Buttigieg is down at.
So if there's a sense that there needs to be like an identity politics, it needs you have to have the intersectional candidate or whatever. She may be the go-to candidate.
Kamala's got the edge right now. Now, there's a tease from Stacey Abrams that she might get in. So does that make it harder for Kamala to be that candidate?
Well, you were right about one thing, Bill. I mean, I remember a month ago when there were no white guys in the race, and I think you were making some people were, correct me if I'm wrong, some people were kind of making the argument that was kind of the way it's going to be. And I think you were making the argument that no, Biden and Bernie and maybe even Beto are going to run, and they have a really good shot of winning.
I wrote a piece November 2017, why 20 would be Year of the Woman. But the kicker of that piece was, if Democrats cannot consolidate around one woman, a Bernie or a Biden, they can't run as vote for me, I'm an old white guy. Like that can't be the basis of the campaign. And the piece I just wrote, how does a white male Democrat run for president very carefully? The point was
that the
not
joke?
Yeah,
it's very carefully the punchline of the joke.
That's the punchline. But the punchline with the point, it's not that they can't run. It's not that the party is rejecting them by any stretch. A lot of parties embracing them, but you still have to run as someone who can be the candidate of the party of civil rights, that can be a leader on issues of race and gender and sexual orientation and fighting against bigotry. So a Biden or a Bernie has to show they can do that. A Beto has to show that. So when I say Stacey Abrams might come to Kamala Harris, I'm not saying the black vote's going to split between the two of them, although it might. But polls show there is a good chunk of the African American vote going to Biden and Bernie. There's a number of white voters who don't want a white candidate. They want to vote for a person of color candidate. But the point is that there is a division and debate over who can play that role, and does that need to be the primary role that the nominee has to play, and do you need someone who embodies the spirit of diversity in the party? So there's division who can do that right now, and that's so it's a little hard to do in terms of taxonomies for each individual candidate, because there's still a lot of fluidity over like who can represent these roles. But I think that's sort of where things are breaking.
This will make a great Bill Scher column in a couple of weeks when things start to firm up. I want to go back to Beto real quick, and also Julian Castro is running too from Texas.
Right.
And there was this poll that came out a couple of weeks ago, Bill. You sent it to me first, and I think it was a Quinnipiac poll maybe.
Yeah. And
it showed, it got hardly any attention, surprisingly. Maybe it's an outlier, but this poll showed that basically, I think it was Beto and Biden and Bernie were all statistically tied with Donald Trump in Texas.
Yeah.
I think that Texas really could be in play. I don't think it's just Latino demographic shifts. I think it's because Republican governors of Texas have spent the last several decades wooing California companies to the Lone Star State, offering tax incentives.
That's right. It's Rick Perry's fault.
Well, I think it's very interesting because, it's educated suburbanites.
Yeah.
I think are the big demographic shift in Texas, not just Latinos. And by the way, John Cornyn won the Hispanic vote in 2014.
Well, again, it's very nominal opposition.
Yeah, it was and he narrowly won it, but he still did. And I think people like even Governor Abbott do pretty solid still in Texas. But look, I think that this is, if Beto's the nominee, there could go Texas. If Biden's the nominee, maybe. And think about Castro or Beto as a possible Veep. John F. Kennedy picked a Texan, Lyndon Johnson in 1960, who delivered the state of Texas. Michael Dukakis tried this maneuver in 1988, picking Lloyd Bentsen as his running mate. Obviously, that didn't turn out so well. But I think that you could see a scenario.
You can't blame Bentsen for it, though.
You can't blame Bentsen for that one. I think you could see a scenario where even if Beto and Castro don't take off, they could be on the very short list of running mates because, look, even if you don't win Texas, if Trump has to defend Texas, if Texas is in play, that's a huge problem electorally.
But that poll shows, again, it's not special to Beto.
True, but when push comes to shove, I would think that it doesn't hurt to have a Texan on.
Oh, no. Obviously, you would certainly compete for Texas if he was to the top of the ticket, but I think it shows that Texas is changing, period. And so anyone who's nominee should make a good run at Texas and see if that poll is for real. And if you're not a Texan at the top of the ticket and you really want to make a hard run for it, Beto or Castro make very logical
right.
choices.
And I think this is, I don't know if Beto's thinking this way, but if I were Beto, this is another argument for why he should run for president. I think if he runs for president and runs a solid race, doesn't embarrass himself, but falls short, he would be very appealing, especially if, say, Elizabeth Warren or Kamala were to win.
Yeah, harder for Bernie or Biden to do a double white male ticket. They're more likely to go with Castro than Beto in that circumstance.
Right, and I think what you do, look, if Biden Castro stays in Texas, California, Arizona, the Southwest, maybe not California for money, but Arizona, Nevada, Texas. Biden doesn't leave Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and that's the election.
Right.
You got to win. Florida's interesting too, right? Florida's important. That's one of the interesting states that seems to be trending more Republican, actually. And I think the Venezuela stuff probably helps Trump there too, but we'll see.
No, Florida, arguably is becoming less and less of a purple state, and I can only assume that Mar-a-Lago, Florida's kind of a home state for Trump. I mean, he did beat Marco Rubio there in the Republican primary, and
Florida's full of a lot of New Yorkers who moved to, sort of outer boroughs New Yorkers probably who moved down there, and then I think you've got the Cuban population and the Venezuela issue. I think helps him down there.
And the fact that DeSantis beat Gillum, in what was generally a Democratic year, further makes that point. And the only congressional seats that flipped in Florida were Clinton won districts. There were no Trump won districts in Florida, House districts that flipped to Democrats. So Texas, Arizona, and maybe even Georgia.
Yeah, isn't that amazing though? I mean, look, who knows how it's going to shake out? But if you had said that Republicans have to worry about Texas but not Florida,
right?
And by the way, let me just say, this was part of my concern with Trumpism all along, is that it trades the growing Southwest for the declining industrial Midwest. And in the long run, that's a horrible trade. Now, maybe it gets you enough electoral votes in the short term to win in 2016, but if that's the deal, that's a bad deal in the long run.
In the long run, but
in the long run, we're all dead.
But still, most people think Democrats have to perform well in the Midwest too, and it really isn't a choice between the two, and that's why Klobuchar. To get back to the taxonomies, Klobuchar is trying to make the case, trying to say, look, if you think we need to have a woman at the top of the ticket and compete in the Midwest, I'm your best bet. And there's an argument for that on paper, but obviously she hasn't really taken off yet.
Yeah,
nobody's really taken off.
I mean, you can see Klobuchar Beto.
Oh, sure. I mean, if she could get it, sure. I mean, that would be that would check off a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
But even those who had the best rollouts, I mean, I would say Kamala had the best rollout. Bernie of the non-Bernie Biden candidates, Kamala had the best rollout. I'd argue Warren actually had the second best rollout. But all of them, whatever good press they had on day one or day 2 and 3, none of them have had second acts. Yeah. None of them had a thing that followed the rollout to say, I'm going to build on this momentum. This is my signature issue. This is how I'm going to unify the country. This is how I'm going to take on Trump. I mean, and obviously, it's very early. It's March. They haven't had the first debate yet. There's plenty of opportunity to get second wins. I'm not kicking anybody out here. But since you're going to have at least 2 people in Biden and Bernie, I'll caveat that in a second. But if you have 2 guys polling solid mid-20s, it makes it even more imperative to get that second win moment. Otherwise, you might just get squeezed out. You can't. Your argument on paper is not going to be sufficient over the course of the year if you got 2 guys soaking up a lot of oxygen, or possibly 3 with Beto. Now, when Biden gets in, I suspect he's going to be completely hammered.
Yeah,
is going to be the most brutal entry of any of the candidates, because the left is just itching to take him down. And whereas like a year ago, they kind of laughed at him. What a joke this guy is. What a dinosaur. Nobody wants that guy. He is completely the wrong guy for this moment. I think now you're starting to sense like, this guy's still beating Bernie, for Pete's sake. This guy's got something.
For a lot of people, the best day is the best day they have is the first day on the campaign. For Biden, it might be the opposite.
I think his worst is going to be the first day.
Yeah.
Or
he just has to.
Or he's going to be severely tested on the first day. He has to show, I know how to respond to criticisms about my past statements, about my comments on busing and my dealing with Anita Hill and the bankruptcy bill, and how am I going to defend my love of bipartisanship? How am I going to defend my belief in free trade?
Here's the thing. You remember George Bush had this line, and it was when I was young and foolish. I was young and foolish, or something like that. It was to dismiss like allegations that he like had DUIs and cocaine and stuff like that, right? When I was young and stupid, I was young and stupid, something like that. Reagan had the joke, I'm not going to make age an issue. I'm not going to use my opponent's youth and inexperience against him. I think Biden needs some way to hand wave it away. I don't think he can get caught in the game of ad hoc.
What I heard him say,
apologizing for everything he said.
What I heard him, what I recall, forgive me if I'm getting the exact words wrong, but I think it was at the John Meekum event he had a few days ago. He said something along the lines of, I haven't always gotten it right, but I've always tried to do the right thing, and I keep trying to be better. I mean, that's sort of the frame I think he's trying to put it in.
He needs something, because I don't think he can play the game of responding every time.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get asked the question. You do a town hall, he's going to get asked those questions. Yeah. So to some extent, it's not his choice. So if he did not do a good job handling that at the top, even people who are sympathetic to him might say, you know what, maybe you're not the right guy for this moment. Those numbers could totally tank. That's a possibility.
Hang on 1 second, Bill.
Yeah.
Remember the old days when I had my light on a timer?
Yeah.
And my light used to go out all the time?
Yeah.
This time my computer was in danger of going out. It's even worse. What do you think about the what's going to happen with the Indiana mayor and with Howard Schultz? How does this end for them? What's the takeaway for them?
There are people who see Buttigieg on a town hall and thinks he speaks cogently and intelligently, and doesn't seem like he's a robot. Some people, talk about taxonomies. There are people who really want to see Democrats propose packing the court and ending the filibuster, and Buttigieg has sort of jumped on those things as a way to say, I'm not from. I mean, because he's not a revolutionary. He's not on the far left, but he definitely has, I think, a pretty big pragmatic streak. But because he's making such a big deal about his youth, those issues are ways to say, I'm going to approach this from a fresh perspective. I'm not going to just be for tradition's sake. So there's definitely an element of the party that likes that. I really doubt that's enough to actually give him the nomination. It makes him an appealing VP. And if you can pick up Indiana with a guy like that, fantastic. And he is a white male, but he's not straight, and he has the military resume to boot. So perhaps you could. Perhaps even a Biden or a Bernie could. Bernie probably wouldn't pick him, but maybe a Biden would.
My prediction is by the end of this, I will be able to pronounce his name, and that's a win.
You haven't mentioned Andrew Yang yet, Matt.
Well, who is
Yang
Andrew?
News?
Who is Andrew Yang?
He's a Silicon Valley entrepreneur who's trying to run largely a single issue campaign on universal basic income. And he's gotten some traction because he goes on shows like Joe Rogan's podcast, and he goes on Tucker Carlson, and he's kind of built up a people that call themselves the Yang Gang that see him as like a true blue outsider who can change the game. And he has you might not know this, Matt, the Democratic Party has changed its debate metrics, its rules for qualifying for the debate to include, for at least the first two debates, if you can get 65,000 donors from 20 states, they need at least 200 in each state, you can qualify for the first two debates, so long as we have 20 or less. If it's over 20 candidates, they're going to do a lottery. So to at least get into the lottery, you have to either do that or be like at 1% in 3 polls. So Yang has met the fundraising standard already, because I think he has successfully gone on these niche podcasts or shows.
Wait, if Joe Rogan's is a niche podcast, what's my podcast?
Matt, you're mainstream media. We know that. You're big media.
Joe Rogan gets millions of people. By the way, let me just say, this is an interesting thing, Bill. So I interviewed Arthur. Speaking of podcasts, I interviewed Arthur Brooks about his new book, Love Your Enemies. And we did a I'm starting to do these video podcasts sometimes where I interview the person in person and we videotape it. And so there were two different 2-minute long clips that I've tweeted. At the time of this taping, one of them has, I don't know what views mean, but one of them has 40,000 views and one of them has 10,000 views. So that means that I've gotten 50,000 views on Twitter, at least, of my interview, of a 2-minute segment of my interview with Arthur Brooks. Want to take a guess how many people have watched the 45-minute long YouTube video of the whole interview?
107.
You're close. It's slightly better, but it's unbelievable. It seems unfathomable. But yeah, something like that.
Yeah, long form video is not the easiest sell, but if you can chop it up,
But Joe Rogan, this is why I bring it up. Joe Rogan gets millions of people, I think.
Well, yeah, but he's built it up over time, and he was a celebrity when he started.
To watch, but okay, I get that, I get all that, but he gets people to watch hours long, like videos that are sometimes multiple 2 hours long.
Well, he has kind of a quasi-conspiratorial bent, and that's like an Alex Jones thing. It's a niche you can play. People who are really prone to absorbing long-form content if it confirms their deluded priors. It's harder to get that with a erudite conversation about the soul of America with Arthur Brooks.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm very happy, and that obviously that doesn't count the people who listen to it. Like on iTunes, this is just a YouTube video. And I mean, frankly, even those 2-minute long clips are very substantive. I mean, so I feel so nourished that we're getting word out about this important book that talks about serious stuff. But I just think it's amazing the dichotomy between how many people watch a 2-minute clip versus watch the 45-minute long video.
I want to plug one more thing of my own before we wrap up, because we're running a bit long today. So I have a piece in Politico that came out yesterday afternoon about the Democratic House. We had two big developments with Pelosi over the past few days. One was the anti-bigotry resolution, which arguably was one of her weaker moments in her speakership so far, where she had a hard time corralling her party, and she couldn't really single out anti-Semitism without getting a lot of pushback from folks who were sympathetic to Ilhan Omar. So it got broadened to, all forms of bigotry. And people on the right in particular were arguing this shows that she doesn't have a firm grip on the caucus. Matthew Continetti wrote in the National Review that her hands are covered in palm olive. It's AOC who runs the caucus. And then a few days later, does an interview with the Washington Post and says, I am against impeachment. And I'm not just against impeachment because it's politically complicated or we can't get the votes. I think it's bad for the country. The fact that it's not going to be bipartisan means it will divide the country, and he's not worth it, which is a pretty loaded comment. So it's not just telling the impeachment crowd, sit down and shut up. It's defending the Biden notion of America, that we should all get along. We should have a commonality of purpose. And if we're being too divisive, that's not good. That's the kind of thing that really chafes at a lot of folks on the left. And when she did that, she got a lot of support from other Democrats in the caucus. She got a lot of backup. Even AOC, who wants to impeach Trump, said, I don't think we can put it 100% off the table, but if that's how she feels, I respect that. So I took those two developments as a way to say, one, I think Pelosi still runs the caucus. Pelosi's still in charge. But she is spending a lot of time beating the left back, sticking her finger in the dike. All the pressure is coming from the left. Yeah. And so she might say, well, we passed H.R. 1 for election reform. We passed the most robust gun control bill, in years. That stuff's getting ignored because of the tension that continues to build between her and the left. And my sense is the way that you can alleviate that pressure on her is to have a more robust, moderate, pragmatist contingent in the caucus. You have folks like Steny Hoyer saying and grumbling, we have 62 new members in the House Democratic Caucus, not 3, clearly an eye towards AOC and Omar and Tlaib. which is true. I mean, I've been saying for weeks, the Democratic majority has won with moderates in, redder areas.
Yeah, but how come Connor Lamb isn't on the cover of Rolling Stone?
Well, that's exactly right. And I don't blame the media for that. The moderates and the practice need to step up. They need to have their big ideas.
All right. Connor Lamb, I'm inviting you. If you want to get 107 views, you're coming on my podcast. Come on. Step up.
You should have seen Connor Lamb, Abigail Spanberger, Lauren Underwood, Alyssa Slotkin, Joe Cunningham, Glenn DeHorn. They probably have a lot to say how they won in red areas, and they're not getting their voice heard for the most part. But that is largely because they have not banded together around a set of ideas to say, we have a different view how to tackle the big problems, whether it's college affordability or climate or child poverty. Like I got a little bit of pushback from the executive director of the New Democratic Coalition, which is the House Caucus, the big House Caucus, and he was saying, there's the Senator Bennett Sherrod Brown bill to expand the child tax credit to slash child poverty. And it has a lot of sponsors. It has many more sponsors than Green New Deal. It would tackle a big problem, child poverty. Yeah. And quite frankly, it's gotten very little attention since it was introduced because they haven't had a strategy to keep focus on it. And also, when I saw it introduced, I didn't think of it as a moderate solution. I looked at Sherrod Brown's bill, doing more from the left, and that's no.
Well, I do think, in some ways, this is like a self-selecting perverse incentive, right? So, like, if you're the kind of person who wants to go to Congress, do the people's work, and keep your head down, vote, like, read the legislation, you're less likely to be a show horse. You're less likely to get attention, right? So there's like. It's sort of to be expected that the people who are the kind of the most serious and about the legislative process, especially when they're newly elected, would be a little bit humble and a little modest and go there and just do the work, that they would be, by definition, the least likely to get attention.
And I respect that completely. And it's easier to be the first mover if you don't care about the details. If you're going to rush a non-binding resolution that, for example, that has no dollar figures and is just going to you promise the moon and give you no roadmap how actually to get there, you can go first.
Yeah, and sadly, we live in a world that rewards that.
Yes,
we no longer punish that; we reward that.
Exactly. So I understand the obstacles to engaging in a thoughtful way, but the hard truth is, they're not engaging. Their hand is being forced. So if they want to say, look, it's a Big Ten party, and there's more voices, and she doesn't speak for all of us, you need to prove it and get out there.
Now, this happens all the time when we talk, Bill. Not all the time, but, frequently. Could you tell us a little grumpy? I feel like we got off to a slow start, but now now I could just keep talking. You've cheered me up.
Well, we started a national emergency and how Republicans are screwed. Once we get into Democratic problems, you perk up.
I think the Democratic part was more fun today and better. We should we had some audio problems early on too. If the center, if the suits at Blocking Heads corporate were to cut some of that out, it wouldn't bother me.
But in our conversation, Matt, have on the Mattometer.
Yeah.
How close is Matt Lewis to voting for the Democratic presidential nominee after this conversation, on a scale of 0 to 100?
It's tempting. If it's Biden, it's tempting.
Even though Biden's, for all intents and purposes, pro-choice.
Yeah. See, I think that's why I can't go there.
I think he said some pro-life things over the course of the years that people will dig up and throw in his face. But obviously, he's not going to put anti-abortion judges on the court.
My guess is I don't think there's I don't say there's not a scenario, but I think it's very unlikely that I will vote for president
again
in 2020. But is there a chance I could be kind of rooting for Joe Biden? It depends how things play out.
Right. And Howard Schultz, what are the chances you vote for Howard Schultz?
Not good. Not good. So, but yeah, it's interesting.
Anything else you have left to plug before we sign off?
I just I did a podcast that's going to come out today about. Have you heard about this book, Hitler in Los Angeles?
I have not.
Yeah. So it turns out that that there was a plan by the Nazis to assassinate 20 Jewish movie stars and some non-Jewish movie stars, including Charlie Chaplin. And there was a former World War I soldier named Leon Lewis, who was Jewish, who recruited spies to infiltrate this cabal and stop some of the things that they planned. So Hitler was very interested in propaganda and felt like the American movie industry could be very damaging to public opinion in America. And this book is all about that. And I interviewed the author. And so, yeah, check that out. Matt Lewis in the News on iTunes, coming soon.
And I have a brand new Books and Politics podcast up this week. Pat Garofalo, who is at the Center for American Progress, has a new book called The Billionaire Boondoggle, very timely book about tax giveaways and subsidies to corporations that states and cities give out to woo companies, the Rick Perry special.
Yeah.
And how that doesn't improve economic development, but fleeces taxpayers and gives money to
Texas has a whole program. Austin, Texas has a whole program where they try to lure Hollywood movie productions.
Right. Well, that's the first chapter because
to move to Texas.
Several states do that, and he has a whole argument how that it doesn't create economic opportunity, it doesn't boost economies.
It's like baseball stadiums.
Movies are going to get made anyway. It's not like you're making more movies because they do it.
You know what it does do, though? It brings liberals to Texas to vote against Donald Trump.
All right, so check that out at the New Books and Politics podcast at newbooksnetwork.com, iTunes, Stitcher, all that good stuff. And we'll talk to you, Matt Lewis, here on the DMZ next week.
All right. See you guys. Thanks, Bill.